So I call to order this meeting of the Policy and Governance Committee that is being held on one of the many lands of the TNRD, of the First Nation communities. And today we are located on Tecumseh territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc people. We obviously cherish and appreciate our partnership with them, and they're welcoming us onto their lands. Any additions or deletions from the agenda? Motion to approve. Moved by Director Thorpe, seconded by Chair Roden. Any opposed? All those in favor? Cool. Carried. Minutes. Anything on the minutes? Thank you. Moved by Director Middleton, seconded by Director Hall. All those in favor? Carried. Reports. Amendments to board. Who's doing this? You are? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So the item 5.1 is a proposed amendment to Board Policy 5.4.1, insurance requirements for TNRD contractors. And this is a fairly, it's a matter which has arisen fairly recently, which is why it's coming to both this committee today and it's on the agenda for the board tomorrow. Any comments or recommendations that this committee has will be reported to the board as part of that before any formal decision gets made. It arose because we are in the process now of entering into contracts for snow clearing at the libraries around the TNRD at winter. And several of those contracts now exceed the threshold set by policy, which allows those contractors to join into our MIABC insurance. It's generally cost prohibitive for them to get their own insurance because of the nature of the contracts and the risk in clearing snow. And so as staff, we're proposing that the limits be increased because they have not been increased since 2018. So that's 6 years of inflation, which we believe is rational grounds for increasing the limits at this time. If this committee recommends that the board do not adopt this change, then we would have serious challenges with some of those snow clearing contracts. And there are some other contracts which are covered in this, like janitorial and waterworks, just because the increased cost of the contracts would mean that we would not then be able to allow them to be part of our insurance, which would mean that they would potentially not be able to enter into the contracts if they could not get their own. So we would very much welcome any comments or thoughts that you have at this time, and obviously I'm here and finance are here if you have questions.
Any comments, Director Middleton?
Thank you. New seat, I couldn't remember which button to push. Just when we see this, and I think when I read through it is my question was answered, but just to be clear, the cost for that addition of assurance is charged back to the contractor, either taken off the top of his contract price or whatever. So if we increase this and with the increases to what might be the cost of insurance through the municipal provider, is there any that are still, that this is still unaffordable for them, or that we're still going to have trouble getting contractors because of the cost of insurance?
Through the chair, thank you, Director Middleton. The cost of insurance will increase slightly as a result of the increased limits, the increased contract sizes. We split that cost with the contractor, so they do contribute to the insurance, but it's significantly cheaper for them than getting their own insurance. I do not believe any have indicated that they would not be able to proceed with the contracts as a result of this.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, that's just for information. You're okay with that? All right, moving on. Oh, where is it? Tiny. Oh, amendments to finance policies. Is that you, CFO Fox? Okay.
Okay, so for the three policies that we're looking at, the first is the bursary policy 5.1.2. The main change to this one is to remove school district 27 from the list of school districts, as they no longer have any schools within the TNRD, and we have not received an application from them in 11 years. And then to also slightly increase the amount that we're contributing, as the $1,000 per school has not been updated in quite a while and doesn't really accurately reflect the cost of education anymore.
Any comments, questions? Chair Roden?
Thank you. Just a couple of notes and questions. Item 1.1, each of the electoral areas shall contribute, And it includes that have physical schools within the TNRD boundaries. For the sake of just accuracy, do we want to amend that to read have physical secondary schools? Okay, 1.3, $1,000 bursary shall be offered to one student, or a $2,000 bursary shall be offered to one student, or a $1,000 bursary shall be offered to two students. Should we be taking out that a $1,000 bursary right at the beginning? Because what are we gonna do? Go, well, you deserve a bursary, but you don't deserve $2,000? No, I hope not. 2.1 must be residents of the electoral areas only, that's fine, and must have been a resident of the electoral area for a minimum of 12 months. As the daughter of an RCMP officer who was transferred around a lot, not in my grade 12 year, but we did get transferred a lot. So I could conceivably have been graduating in June and only have moved to that school district in August or September, which is generally when our CMP transfers are completed. So I was wondering if we want to amend that to just to be more fair, and also to students who start late. School districts don't actually do their report until September 30th of the snapshot of how many students are enrolled, because a lot of kids are late enrolling in September for various reasons. So maybe we want to must have been a resident of the electoral area since September 30th of the previous year, which is when the school districts capture that information about who is a student. Is that okay?
I think that's a fair.
If everyone is not in agreement, please yell.
Please don't yell.
Please don't yell. And that was all I had. The only other thing was, just in case anyone is freaked out about that, must submit a 500-word essay. Because I know you say 500 words to a school kid and they're like, oh my God. This little tiny bit at the bottom here, this article that I wrote yesterday for the paper this week about Jackie Taggart not seeking re-election, that tiny little section is 464 words. So that's what just under 500 words looks like. We're not asking them to write War and Peace. So just in case anyone thinks 500 words is being unduly harsh on these kids, it's not at the grade 12 level. Okay, that was all I had.
You okay with all that? Okay.
The next policy is the 5.1.4 policy. This is the electoral area grant and aid policy. There's a couple wording changes. The main change and the reason for bringing this forward is the recent change to our ability to support fire protection services. You'll see that on the second page near the bottom. We've deleted that line that specifies nothing for fire protection and kind of rephrased that to allow us more freedom with providing that support.
Comments or questions? Okay, want to go on to the next?
And the last one is the 5.1.5. This is the Canada Community Building Fund policy. The changes to this policy are mostly to reflect the new agreement that was just provided to us that expires in 2020 or 2034. Mostly around the biggest change was how third-party projects are administered and whether the eligibility for those and where that exists.
Questions or comments? Chair Roden.
Thank you. On page 23, item 3.2.1. Prior to receipt and review of any funding application discussions with third parties, it really desperately needs a comma between application and discussions. Otherwise, that sentence makes very little sense. Dale, stop laughing.
Hey, I was already told to don't laugh anymore. Watch it. Sorry. Any other questions or comments? CEO.
Thank you, Chair Bass. Just a comment that in the electoral area director committee that's upcoming this week as well, we are going to talk a little bit more in detail about the community funds. There was questions after the last board meeting where we talked generally, but there's more specific questions that we'll address and see if anything comes out of that. So just as information.
Excellent. Okay. So we have three recommendations. I'm going to start with the first one. Moved by Chair Roden, seconded by
Second.
Vice Chair Smith. All those in favor? Carried. Number 2. Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Director Hall, and seconded by Director Thorpe. All those in favor? Carried. And 3.
Move 3.
Moved by Director Middleton, second by whoever was it, Chair Roden? Yeah. All those in favor? Carried. On to the next item, Indigenous relations.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bass. Attached is a drafted Indigenous framework, and you'll notice that there's no recommendation here. It's simply for the committee to provide feedback, and some background on the thinking behind that is that we want to ensure that we have ample opportunity to connect with staff throughout the regional district to ensure that they're aligned with this framework. And so that's why there's no recommendation, and you'll see it similarly with my next report coming after this. But essentially, this Indigenous relations framework is to sort of lay out what the TNRD is committed to based on the strategic plan for this term, certainly, and as well guiding the organization down the road of reconciliation. So it's really just one page. It's intended to talk about the work that the TNRD is committed to doing, the training that the TNRD is committed to taking to sort of enhance our abilities to work with Indigenous communities. It's meant to be a one-pager because that's when we look around the province at other regional districts and their best practices. That's what they've done, is keeping things short and really just committing to a few key actions that they know are tangible. So with that being said, I would be happy to take committee feedback.
Comments, questions? Chair Roden.
Never ask an editor to go through stuff like this because we will find things. Okay, first paragraph. I believe relationships and reconciliation, it should be are a top priority, not is a top priority. And then I can hear you. Under policy, the second bullet point, the TNRD will use this framework as a reference point to ensure new projects are in line with this framework. That just sounds kind of 1984-ish double talk. I don't know. Use this framework to ensure new projects are in line with this framework. That the worm eating itself here. So I don't know how that can be tidied up just to make it. Do we even need it? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Or we'll use this framework as a reference point for new projects, full
Yeah.
stop.
No, I think that's what folks are thinking, and that's
Redundant, that's exactly the word.
why we wanted to
Especially-
bring it to the
Just my
committee.
observation.
And then on the third, under learning on the second page, Indigenous in the third bullet points needs a capital I because it's capitalized everywhere else, just for to be standard. And then that it was kind of a word salad, the final sentence. I thought, through the development of this learning guide, the TNRD will save space for Indigenous communities to have their own sections that will help grow regional awareness and understanding.
Sorry, I think you might be looking at a different framework. I think you might be, or is there, because that's not what
This is,
unless the incorrect one was attached to the agenda.
Oh,
That
I don't
should be
know.
The last.
it says policy, relationships, and then learning.
Oh, no, I see. Sorry, it is the correct one. I was thinking it was the final sentence, not the final bullet
I
point.
think maybe it should be rather than through the development of this learning guide, perhaps this learning, within this learning guide, the TNRD will save space. Because the action of developing the learning guide is not saving the space. Yeah, I'm not explaining myself very well, but it's just a little bit confusing. So I think it just within this learning guide, the TNRD will save space for Indigenous communities to have their own sections that will help grow regional awareness and understanding. And then in the last one, it should be in summary. And then through this framework, the TNRD is committed to advancing reconciliation and growing our relationships with Indigenous communities. You're repeating a lot of what was in the first sentence.
Start the sentence with the TNRD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's because it says in summary, the TNRD is committed to advancing reconciliation and growing the organization's understanding. And then it says the TNRD is committed to advancing reconciliation again.
Yeah.
So that just needs to be tightened up a little bit to avoid the repetition, I think. But no, I think it's a very strong, I like having it only, just over 1 and a bit pages, because I think that's good. Concise is good. It sets it out very clearly. I think it's a very useful document, and obviously a lot of thought went into it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. CAO?
Thank you, Chair Bass. I just wanted to also just talk high level general about our Indigenous experiences of recently. I know I've spent some time at some events, and I know that there's a lot of I've been talking to a lot of First Nations chiefs that are very interested in talking to us, and I just feel like we're gaining traction around Indigenous relations. And I just feel like I wanted to thank Corbin for his work on this one. This is just another step in that direction and trying to simplify how we engage and work with our partners. I've been hearing it a lot, and I just wanted to get the feedback from the group, what you're hearing, or if at all, anything from some of our 25 First Nations.
Anyone else? Chair Roden?
Thank you. I just, on the subject of relations, I saw a very nice post from Stephen Sherwood, I believe his name is, with Cook's Ferry Band. Very complimentary to the TNRD and assistance during the recent Shetland Creek wildfire and all the issues around that. So I think that is a very valuable relationship to pursue. We certainly do have some feelers out there and some inroads there, and it was great to see that partnership, and it was nice to see that acknowledgement from Cook's Ferry. I think they did an awesome job during the wildfires of keeping their members informed as well, just putting that out there. They were very, very on top of the situation and making sure that their band members were very up to speed at all times about what was going on.
Through Chair Bass, I agree. And I think unfortunately emergencies bring us together in different ways, and our relationships with our First Nations are certainly a big part of our EOC connections and communication with the province and with that level of government. And certainly I think that helps open doors and have these further conversations.
Just from my perspective, I'll get to you in a second, Director Thorpe, then Director Laird, then Director Moss. I think we've come a long ways. I saw her too. I think we've come a long way since we first started talking about this. It was just a few years ago, and I think that a lot of that is due to Corbin and his work and his background. So thank you. Okay, Director Laird.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question around how do you start engagement? Like in our area, M&N, there's 6 different bands. And how do you start engagement? Do you go and talk to them about what's happening in our community, or do you wait till they approach you?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. And I think it's really a case-by-case basis in terms of the community and what they're wanting. And so often what the TNRD has been able to do, certainly since I've started here, is be able to use a lot of our projects that are ongoing and be able to take those to the Indigenous communities and say, this is something that we're looking at doing, and we'd like you to be at the table with us. And that's often a positive approach to helping build those relationships. Recognizing that often isn't the case in every area, right? Every electoral area or member municipality might not have a project on the go that we can use as sort of a starting point. Typically then what we do is we'll request a meeting with chief and council when sort of electoral area directors are ready for that. And that will sort of be the starting point for those conversations, but also recognizing that because we're trying to engage and build relationships with 25 Indigenous communities, it's going to take some time for us to be able to get to all of them and start building those relationships in a positive way.
Thank you.
CAO. and then Director Thorpe, and then Director Morris, and do I have you too? Good.
Thank you. Just to add to Director Laird's comments and Mr. Kelly's comments too, we got to be very cautious too, because with 25 First Nations, we've got one of him, one Corbin Kelly, and it's hard because we physically can't be in all those places all the time. So we're trying to be strategic, and we're kind of focusing on projects and connections that we make, but we'll get to everybody. I know we will. It'll just take some time.
Director Thorpe.
I was just going to echo Chair Roden's comments with regard to Cook's Ferry. During the wildfire, I actually had information envy. They were right on top of things and keeping residents informed. And I think we have a pretty good relationship with Cook's Ferry now, and that would be one to definitely work with. The other one is during the wildfire, I was also speaking with Frank Anton from Bonaparte, and he was quite receptive to the idea of working with engagement. And I believe I forwarded that on to Scott and Corbin. Anyway, thank you.
Director Morris.
Oh, thank you. We are going through the microphone, I assume. I think just basically in addition to Corbin, what you're saying is I'm just wondering in the framework, how often would you envision that we would go back to the partnerships that we have engaged in and revisit those frameworks in general? Just trying to set what that multi-year approach or decade approach might in fact be.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. It depends on our agreements that we have with Indigenous communities. Oftentimes, there are clauses in those agreements that the working group that's established out of them will revisit those MOUs or those protocol agreements on an annual basis or a biannual basis, so that we're staying on top of things, if that's what I'm understanding the question to be. So yeah, we do, those agreements set out sort of meeting dates for each community to community forum that will take place based on who's part of those agreements and who's signatory to those. And as well, part of those community to community forums are reviewing the MOU and making sure that it's up to date and still in line with the government, both governments' priorities.
Director Middleton.
Thank you. And just not completely unrelated, but could I please have a reminder of when the flag raising ceremony is going to be? I was just checking through my emails and couldn't see anything, and I'm going away. I don't know if it was something that went out and I just RSVP'd no because I knew I was going to be away, but when is the flag raising ceremony?
Yeah, very timely question, because at this point we aren't sure anymore. We've been in contact with Tecumloops, and unfortunately we missed a deadline, and so we aren't sure. Currently, it's scheduled for September 23rd in the afternoon, but we aren't sure if that will be the confirmed date. But that should be sorted out by the end of the day today.
Okay, thank you. And if it does go ahead with that date, I will be away and will unfortunately have to miss it, but thanks for the reminder.
CAO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Bass. Just to add to that as well, I know we're working hard with T-Test to get this accomplished. There's been a bunch of change and concerns we've gone through. There's injuries at T-Test Council as well, with people being hurt and over the last number of months. So we are working with the CAO there, and we hope to have something pulled together soon, but there's other factors as there's an election coming up in October with T-Test. There's other things happening, but we're doing our best to do the flag raising, the MOU signing, and the community to community meeting all at once, because it would make sense to pull it all together. So we'll do our best to make it happen. It just requires some approvals by this board and their council in order to make sure we have the right documents.
Anyone else? You okay with the feedback? Good. Moving on to the next one, the advocacy framework.
Yeah, okay, another one just for information and for the committee to provide feedback. Again, I'm hoping that there's not any word salads in this one or grammatical errors. I'm not sure who I would be referencing with that. No, the intention of this advocacy framework is really to streamline the approach of directors and staff when it comes to advocating to senior levels of government. And so this one is a little more lengthy than the Indigenous Relations framework. But the intention of this is to sort of update some policies because we do have some out-of-date policies and policies that we aren't even following anymore. And then it also describes, sort of the key objectives and then the key actions that both the board and staff will take to ensure that the ends of this framework are met. So essentially what we're trying to do, and we've started doing this so far, is setting out a handful of strategic priorities that are in line with the strategic plan that we need commitment from the provincial or federal government on. And so examples are small to very small utility system funding is one that's a year-over-year priority to UBCM. And what we're trying to do is develop a strategic approach as to how we're actually going to advocate for that. So that we aren't leaving our advocacy to those 15-minute meetings with ministers at UBCM. The other thing that this framework is wanting to do is to really develop a comprehensive background. The board sets out their priorities, what they would like advocated for, and then staff will work on a background to sort of determine where things have been in the past, some potential solutions that staff can work towards. And we have done that in the past with previous requests to UBCM. And then, also going more into depth about, not wanting, letters to the minister to be the go-to solution when we have challenges with the province, and wanting to develop a more collaborative approach, certainly recognizing that there's an opportunity and often a need to send letters to the minister, but that we might be able to be more successful to go through staff channels and have those more frank conversations with ministry staff to potentially look to a solution to whatever the problem might be. And then, like I said, it comes with sort of a suite of policy updates or amendments that would come out of the adoption of this framework. So just looking for the committee's feedback, again, thoughts on where things are at. I know it's a little different from perhaps the way things have been done previously, but I just want to make sure that we aren't duplicating work and that we're having the best use of our time and that we're being successful in our advocacy.
Chair Roden, anything?
There are no word salads. It's very good. Thank you. This is awesome. There are a few typos, so I can go over those privately with you afterwards if you would prefer, to spare your blushes. The one that I did notice was on page 50. It's on the bottom of the page that has the header policies and their objectives. At the bottom, it says under orientation, education, seminars, the board should strive to identify 3 to 7 shared priorities. Everywhere else in the document, it's 5 to 7 shared priorities.
Sorry, I didn't print out the entire agenda package. I'm trying to save the trees here. And so mine is just numbered for the actual agreement. Oh, I see it. Yeah,
So,
no,
yeah.
that is an error on my end. That
Yeah,
should be
because
5 to
it's
7.
referenced several other times, the number of board priorities, and it's always given as 5 to 7.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the outlier there. Key actions, it should be rationale with an E on the end, not rational, but I'll go over that later. And I think that was it in terms of just making a sort of material change.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. I'm trying to beat down that side of my DNA. Anyone else? Director Thorpe.
Thank you. So under policies, number 3, it says in here, as this framework replaces this policy and lays out the process for directors to come to the TNRD staff first to avoid duplication of work and to ensure we're remaining on track in our advocacy priorities. Now, are we just referring to things that are going to UBCM, or are we talking about every single letter that we might potentially write to a ministry?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Director Thorpe. I think it really is, again, a case-by-case basis. I think it would determine or need to be determined by the board. Of course, the board will need to approve if a letter is being sent to the minister, if it's a board endorsed letter. Obviously, we aren't trying to micromanage if directors wish to send letters to the minister on their own director letterhead by any means, but the hope is that essentially before we get to the point of wanting to send a letter to the minister, whether it's specific to an electoral area or specific to the board, that directors who are perhaps bringing forward that issue would come and chat with staff first to sort of determine as to whether or not that's the necessary step or if there might be a different alternative.
Okay, I think we want to be very careful that we don't micromanage here, because further up here, it says the intent is not to limit directors' authority, rather to reduce duplication of work. And I'm totally in favor of not duplicating work, but I think we have to be very careful that we don't get to a point where a director is so hindered that they can't write a single letter without talking to the staff first and then potentially the board, because it kind of takes away from there actually being a director in that case. What's the point?
Yeah, no, and I certainly understand your concern and those conversations with staff. It's not like staff, if you were to come and talk with me, if you wanted to send a letter to the minister, I don't have any approval process as to whether or not you can send that letter. The intent of the framework is to have that conversation to be able to say, if this is what you want to do, go ahead. Obviously, it's your prerogative as a director, but wanting to say, perhaps our staff, myself or others who work in different departments might already be having those conversations, right? And just wanting to have a fuller picture before a director writes a letter. Again, it's nowhere in this framework does it give staff the authority to override a director's prerogative to send a letter to a minister. It's just wanting to reduce that duplication of work and perhaps look for a different alternative if it's available.
Okay. I think we might want to be careful with the wording there. The other one is, however, for individual directors requesting meetings will only be to staff and will need to be approved by the board before TNRD staff will submit the meeting request. Now, if I have this correctly, that would only apply to EA directors. Is that correct? Not to municipal directors because they fall under a different mandate? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. If I can assist Director Thorpe with this, the policy 1.1.6, which is the one which is referenced as being proposed for repeal, is purely about directors, and it is all directors who are arranging meetings with politicians at other levels of government, so ministers, MLAs, etc., when they are looking to speak on behalf of the TNRD. So the existing policy already states that they must first obtain authorization to do so by resolution from the board, and this, as I say, this refers to arranging meetings. So you're concerned about writing letters. This does not impact your ability to write letters. In terms of control over what directors can do, it is equal for all directors, and they already must gain authorization from the board to do so. So I think Mr. Kelly's proposals are essentially streamlining and removal of duplication in our policies and documents. I don't believe you'll see an overall change in your ability to take actions and to lobby.
And if I can just add to that as well, because I think you were talking about policy 1.1.11 perhaps with UBCM meeting requests. And again, that's in line with the existing policy that any meetings need to be approved by the board. The only change would be that we're kind of wanting to keep the full minister meetings, right? So when we have the opportunity to sit down with the minister, that those are going to be the board endorsed advocacy priorities that are set out at the beginning of the term. And then as individual directors, municipal or otherwise, have sort of these ongoing and emergent issues, if they aren't sort of board endorsed advocacy per se, that staff would work with the director to still request a meeting at UBCM, but that it would be to ministry staff and not included in the full ministry meeting, which again is consistent with our current approach.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it. Director Hall.
Thank you. I was just thinking, just on that policy, you know, when you include collaboration with the CAO and staff, when it comes to federal and provincial elected officials, I think you would get a better response if it was, you know, conversation with, say, Scott, with regards to some challenge that we might have, you know, within the district or as an electoral area representative, so that we're all on the same page, as opposed to having, you know, 27 directors independently writing letters to various levels of government. I would think that just my common sense tells me I would want to include, especially Scott, okay, and get some advice and some direction. Not that it's necessarily a board directive, but it would be coming from my particular area. I would think that that would be, you know, advisable for any director.
CAO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Bass. That would be, in my experience, probably the best path forward. Just so there's no surprises and we make sure that we're communicating it properly. I can think of many occasions where we've been able to, as staff, reach out to staff in the ministries with deputy ministers and push this forward to the minister and get things done without the letter. But it's still important that the area directors or all directors kind of follow that process, because it would be much more efficient and streamlined if we could do that.
Anyone else? Director Thorpe, your mic's on? Oh, stop. No problem. Director O'Reilly's not here to remind us about it. Anyone else? Are you okay with that feedback? Okay, we're moving on to new business. I'm going first. Going to welcome Acting Director Kerslake to a committee meeting that usually goes on much longer than this one apparently will. And it's good to have you here. Thank you. Any other new business? All righty. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Chair Roden. But all right, I'll just adjourn us. I like to have somebody else do it, you know?